Late in my first marriage, I would lose it fairly regularly. Now, I could tell you some of the reasons why, and you might say, oh my gosh, you had every reason to. I would too, and all those things, but that's not really what this is about. Suffice it to say that my partner had an issue with addiction, and it caused him to behave in ways that he had trouble functioning, put our kid in danger sometimes, or sometimes at that time just made me embarrassed. And whenever one of these things would happen, I would lose it. I might be belittling. I might get controlling. I might be rejecting or downright nasty. So I would go from being righteously rageful to feeling ashamed and doubting myself. I call this the anger shame cycle, and it's really common in relationships where there's an addictive issue or some other impairment, and definitely with people who have narcissistic tendencies. In this video, I'm going to cover the 5 dangers of the anger shame cycle, 3 stages to avoid being gaslit, and the key question to ask yourself to break free from these emotional loops and finally get clear on what's really happening. This cycle can be hard to break. When you are in righteous rage, you're disowning the part of yourself that is able to see that you're not always 100% right. We disown our humility when we're gripped by righteous rage about something. And when we are in shame, we are disowning the angry part and the part that has a right to feel the way they feel or has some skin in that game. So when we disown our humility, we end up having poor behavior because we act out of that righteous rage. And when we disown our rage or our upset, this is when we get gaslit. Either we gaslight ourselves and say, oh my gosh, you shouldn't have behaved that way. What was the big deal? The poor blah, blah, blah. Or it leaves us wide open for someone else to say, well, you're so controlling, that's the problem. You lost your mind, that's the problem. So the real problem is that neither of those places are authentically you. If you're gripped by an emotion of feeling, this is outrageous, I'm right, blah, 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 that's not authentically you. That's your ego that's very identified with that emotion and the thoughts that your mind is telling you about what's happening. And they are driven out of those emotions of rage, embarrassment, fear, whatever it is. Same is true of when you are in shame, like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm so horrible. That's also not authentically you. That is also the ego causing you to feel and act out of guilt and shame. And when we're in those grips, we're not in alignment with our authentic self, our true self. Because what happens when we get really, really emotional about things is we become so identified, we believe it's true. And we get further and further from clarity of sort of like, no, I know this to be true in a very authentic, rooted, calm way. So there are 5 dangers that I see to this anger shame cycle. The first is that it disrupts and erodes your relationship with people that you love, right? Like whenever we behave in a way that's disrespectful or controlling or dismissive, we're eroding our relationship with that other person. The second reason that the anger shame cycle is so damaging, and this is one of the ones that I see as the biggies, it makes it far more difficult for us to decipher where we really stand. When you're in a state, you can only think equal to the emotion that you're feeling. So if you're feeling righteous rage, you're only going to be able to think equal to that emotion. And that's not logical. If you're in this downtrodden shame spot, you're only going to be able to think equal to I'm horrible, I'm the worst ever. And that is also not a place of being able to reason. And so it is the identification with that very large emotion that causes us to doubt ourselves later. Any part of that argument that you had, you either are saying, I don't have a right to feel that way because I behave so bad, or you are so swept in it that there's something that is not jiving internally and you doubt yourself. Third issue with the anger shame cycle is that it erodes your relationship with yourself. In other words, you inhibit how much you can trust yourself because you've either just lost it or you're beating the hell out of yourself. And when you can't trust yourself because you're not grounded, it causes you to ignore your intuition even more. So there's a voice inside you. There is an inner knowing, but all of these emotions and all of these thoughts and all this ego is in the way. And we think that is our true north, that this is the truth. It is not, and it's blocking you from actually hearing a voice that might be saying something more important, like, hey, you're kind of out of line here, or hey, there's something really wrong here that you maybe need to look at in a different light. The fourth reason that the anger shame cycle is problematic is that it keeps us in this endless loop. What do I do? How do I fix this? How do I change this other person? And then the fifth reason that the anger shame cycle is problematic is that you are wide open to being gaslit, either by yourself or by someone else, as I mentioned before. I want to give you 3 steps to avoid being gaslit because, as I said in my TED Talk, we don't really need other people to gaslight us because we do it ourselves. So whether someone else is gaslighting you or you're gaslighting yourself, here are 3 steps to avoid it. 1, recognize when you're in a state. You must admit to yourself, I am emotionally dysregulated. I'm not seeing things clearly. I am in a heightened emotion. 2, trust that you can take some time to calm yourself down, and that if you do, more will be revealed. If you, instead of rushing off to do something, calm yourself down and trust that that time is worth it, you will get more information. 3, recognize there is a kernel of truth in whatever you're feeling. So even if you're in righteous rage and you're like, oh my God, I'm so crazy right now, there's a kernel of truth. There's a reason you're feeling upset. Same thing. If you are in shame and feeling horrible, well, there's a kernel of truth in that as well. You probably, did something or felt something, or maybe even just thought something that you're beating yourself up about, right? So it's not that there's a kernel of truth in that you should feel ashamed, but there's a kernel in truth. There's always another side. There's always 2 sides to everything. The question to ask yourself is, if it's anger, it's like, well, I do have a right to be angry. And if it's shame, well, what is my part in this? And sometimes your part in it isn't necessarily that you did anything wrong. It's maybe that you allowed a boundary to be crossed in the first place. So in my case, let's say that I found some pills and my husband had promised he was going to go off and I found them. Well, of course, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to feel betrayed, and I have a right to feel that way. So here's the key question I mentioned. Do I want those feelings to drive my behavior? So even though I have a right to feel angry, it doesn't give me license to just eviscerate someone or treat someone with disrespect. That's going to make me feel bad about myself. It's going to erode my relationship with the other person, like I said, and it's going to cause me not to trust myself. And it's going to keep me further from knowing what I really need to do or feel in that moment. So if I do lose it, later I should feel remorse. I did something wrong. I did something that isn't in alignment with who I want to be. Feeling remorse for something that you did or said is very different than having a beat down on yourself. The key to not being gaslit is twofold. First, you acknowledge where you went wrong to yourself. Then don't erase what originally upset you. This is nothing that we do with someone else. This is something that when you bring yourself back to center, you discern very non-emotionally for yourself. Okay, where did I kind of go wrong? Where did I do or say something that maybe wasn't appropriate or didn't help the situation? And then where is the place that I'm really upset? Like, what is the point that I'm feeling that there's something not in alignment for me here? Now, I want to give you some tips, but if you like where this is going and it's driving with you, then you might be interested in my free boundaries course, Stop Setting Boundaries, which is less than an hour long, and I'll put the link in the description below. Here's a couple of tips. Having compassion for someone else is fabulous and necessary, right? To help you balance. If you're in righteous rage, you can calm yourself down by recognizing, like, okay, let me just think about what this other person is also going through. But even more importantly, compassion for yourself. If you're having trouble calming yourself down, if you did, lose it or whatever, or if you're in a shame cycle or whatever, having compassion for where you're at is very important because it helps you to be able to bring clarity. Don't judge yourself, because just like any child, a child is not going to respond to judgment. They're going to listen when they know that they're heard. And that's what these little parts inside ourselves are like. They're like little children. If you have compassion for yourself, you'll be able to hear better what that part of yourself is really trying to express. I hope I left you with enough energy to like this video. We will see you next time on The Monday Muse.